Today, we're looking at Diamine Delamere Green. Hi, I'm Adam, and I'm an ink guy. I get inks, test them, and share the results with you. Now, Diamine Delamere Green is a green ink. And to make sure I have a range of experience with this ink, I do the writing samples. I then put the ink into a different pen for a day. I then put it into a Lamy Al-Star with a 1.1 stub to take my notes for this video. And before we go to the writing samples, let's look at the sciencey bits. And up first is the chromatography, and I agree with Vita that I've learned a lot by doing multiple chromatographies. The one on the left is done the way it's supposed to be done. I put a line of ink down, immediately dunk it into water for 10 to 15 seconds. And we see a nice light purple on the bottom that works its way up into a very cool looking green with a dark blue across the top. The one on the right I let dry for 10 minutes before I dunk it into water. Now, to be very short and honest about it, it looks exactly the same, which makes me feel that this particular ink is going to have no real resistance or hold on about it. And speaking of resistance tests are done to see how this ink can be expected to perform on the page, and more importantly, how hard it might be to clean from your pens. I let that smear dry for 3 days before I test it. Looking at the highlighter, we can see that it doesn't particularly like it. Yes, it has some feather. Yes, it has some spread. It is the second H that is highlighted that makes me fear losing something important if it's highlighted. I just don't need to be able to lose reading of words. So because of how that H performs, I would not use this if I had to highlight notes. Water, for only 30 seconds when that drop is put down, is completely reactivating and pulling it up off the page. It does leave some gray behind, or some very, very light green, but basically it's going away. And more telling is what goes on with the pen flush. Pen flush basically does the same thing water did. It doesn't do anything especially more, which makes me feel that we shouldn't get to the pen flush stage to get this out of your pens. Now, bleach does very much what's expected. It completely pulls it up off the page. It stains a couple areas yellow, which is always odd that bleach does that. And it leaves some of that blue behind. We shouldn't get to the point of needing bleach to clean this from our pens. For the inks I've tested, I've found an average viscosity of 2.5, with the realm of normal being from 2.1 to 2.9. Diamine Delamere Green has a viscosity of 2.49. So it's very normal, almost average. To find my average dry times, I use my writing samples done on Clairefontaine, Tomoe River, and Rhodia paper with the extra fine and medium nib. For the inks I've tested, I have found an average dry time of 17 seconds, with the realm of normal being from 13 to 21 seconds. Diamine Delamere Green has an average dry time of 17 seconds. That is average. That and its viscosity make this ink almost a perfect ink for testing out pens, because its viscosity and dry time are so normal that it can tell you whether that particular pen is wet or dry. It's fantastic. Now, let's look at the writing samples. I picked this ink up in sample form. And to keep my writing samples consistent, I use a Jinhao 159 with a Goulet 1.1 stub, a Jinhao X450 with a Goulet medium, and a Jinhao X750 with a Goulet extra fine. Let's look at Clairefontaine. We get no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 gives no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. We do see a little bit of shading going on from one word. Diamine doesn't look as dark as the word green, so it seems like there can be some shade from word to word. It's a dull green, but it's there. It's a dull tone change, but it's there. I'm saying dull even though it's, plenty of inks that we've seen and will see have subtle shade differences. This one just, for me, goes, eh. The extra fine has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. 10 seconds to dry. The medium gives us still no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen.
Little bits of shading. We see little bits of shading in quick, in brown, in fox. So it does show some shading here with 18 seconds to dry. The scrubby for the extra fine and the fine, or the extra fine and the medium, both show us that we're not going to get any color variation, although with the medium we did get color variation in the writing. The smear test says I could likely recover it if I did smear while I was writing. So we look at Tomoe River, which gives us no bleeding. It does give ghosting because it's Tomoe River. The 1.1 gives no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shade. A lighter tone comes out with the extra fine, but the extra fine has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. It takes 17 seconds for it to dry. It gets a little bit darker when we go to the medium, which has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. 26 seconds to dry on a rather dull green, to me, dull green. 26 seconds, that's a bit. The scrubby for both the extra fine and the medium say we're not going to expect color variation, and we didn't get it. And the smear test says you don't recover what you write on Tomoe River. So I look at Rhodia paper. Rhodia gives us no bleeding, no ghosting. The 1.1 has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade. Yeah. The extra fine has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen. It does have some shading in the writing, and the shading does occur in one word. So in quick, we start with darker, it gets a bit lighter, it gets darker again. It happens the same thing in brown, the same thing in fox, the same thing in over. So we do get some nice color variation in the writing itself. 12 seconds to dry. Now, because I get curious, I always use different pens to write my notes. I always test them in a different pen at some point between when I do the writing sample and do this. So I use the Lamy 1.1 in an All-Star, and we don't get a ton of color variation with the All-Star. Now, I like the Lamy stubs. They're my favorite stub. They're crisp. They're very crisp. I like it. They don't tend to me, the stub here doesn't tend to me to feel super wet, which is nice to bring out some of those qualities. With this stub, we do see some color variation. We see it in quick. We see it in the word green, in the word feels, in the word flat. So you have to choose the right pen. So it's one of the reasons that I do these samples the way that I do them, and I do the testing for myself the way that I do it, because it's nice to go ahead and keep your notes on how an ink performs so that you can make it nicer in the future. Anyway, medium, no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, some shading. We see shading in fox, we see shading in quick and in lazy. It took 19 seconds to get there. The scrubby for the extra fine and the medium both show us we're going to get some color variation, and we did. The smear test says you can likely recover it. Being a color I really wasn't caring for, I decided to test it on another paper, another tone, so I went to the Rhodia Yellow. Of course, with the Rhodia, we don't get any bleeding, we don't get any ghosting, but the tone of the ink changes. It starts to get a little bit of life in it with the yellow paper. So it just feels dull and lifeless here, and here it gets a little bit of something. It's nice. Here. Here. Yeah. That's my thoughts on it, though. The 1.1 has no feather, no spread, no halo, no sheen, no shading. The extra fine has no feather, spread, halo, sheen, but it does show some shading in the writing. Not the same shading that we got with the white paper, but still get some nice shading, especially you see it in the word over, and you can see it in the word seconds. It shows very nicely there. I just think the color itself got nicer here, although the shading doesn't get to show through as nice. 12 seconds to dry. Medium, no feather, spread, halo, sheen, or shade, and 19 seconds to dry. I think my camera just went wonky on its focus. The scrubby and the extra fine shows us little bits of color variation, and we did get little bits of color variation. The medium said none, and we got none. So the scrubby held pretty true. The smear test, you could likely recover this. So I tried White Lines paper because it's a gray tone paper, and it did not help matters. It did bleed. It does ghost. just looking at the tone difference. And you know, I know that it doesn't get to come through as well on camera, and all I can do is my best to explain it to you. We had lifeless. We had the beginnings of life being resuscitated, being given life like Pinocchio, something going on here. A nicer color. It just had a little bit something more that was missing here, and that's hard to explain to people sometimes. But here it's lost again. So it kind of goes like this, you know, it's that no, 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 yes, yeah, you know what, I think I got it. No, I lost it. Sorry, gone. So the white lines paper, it does have bleed, it does have ghosting. The 1.1 has spread, it has feathering, it has no halo, no sheen, no shade. The feathering there is a little more extreme than I would put up with. I would not use this ink on this paper. That's too much for me. The extra fine has some spread. It has no feathering, no halo, sheen, or shade, and only 1 second to dry. Now this is where you really get to see the difference between when I'm calling something 1 second, because 1 second is me rounding to the nearest second, and sometimes that might be, you know, 0.501 seconds kind of thing. Or it might be 1.4901 kind of thing, and it's all 1 second. So we see a huge change that can happen, and that's just because there's the timing of me on the button watching it. The medium gives us no feathers, gives us spread. It gives us some feathering in some areas, not no feather. No feather no feather on the beginning of quick, feathering on the end of quick. Minor feathering in brown, no feathering on fox. No feathering on jumps, some feathering on the. No feathering in the beginning of the, feathering at the end of the. So it's not even consistent in its feathering here. So we do get feathering, we do have spread, we have no halo, no sheen, no shade, 5 seconds to dry. We look at the scrubby, we don't expect to see color variation in the writing because the scrubby gives us none and we didn't get any. The smear test says you could likely recover this if you smeared while you were writing, and that's all that I have for the writing sample.
Instead of finding inks that look like Diamine's Delamere Green, I would prefer to find an ink that complements its color on the page. And I've chosen Robert Oster's Direct Sun because it is an amazing orangey red color. Before I give my opinion on this ink, I would ask if you've enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. And if it's your first time here, I would invite you to subscribe. So what do I think of Diamine's Delamere Green? I think this green for me feels kind of dull and lifeless, very flat as a green. With an exception of when you write on the yellow Rhodia paper, it comes to life like Pinocchio. So if you write on yellow Rhodia paper a lot, love this ink. If you write on white paper, off-white, personally I'd pass. Thanks for watching.